In this video, I'm going to be making a dwarf character in Elden Ring. We are playing a fantasy game, and what better way to experience that fantasy than the best fantasy race in all the lands? The Dwarfs! First up is our character selection, where we can build our own character, and sadly you will find out if you want to build a character like this, that there is no height slider in this game whatsoever. That's kind of a bummer, so I guess we just have to be an above average height dwarf then. And that can only be offset by the second saddest thing in all this character selection, which is that this right here is the biggest beard that I could find for this character. There is no bigger beard than this, and I really wish that there was. Unfortunately, we cannot have a gigantic flowing beard in this game. So I gave my dwarf an eye patch, because depth perception is not necessary for dwarves, as everybody knows. The class I picked was the warrior class. The reason why I picked the warrior is because, well, they have the most dwarf-oriented weapon, having an axe, a shield, and some light armor that kind of shows off our muscles here. Unfortunately, the armor itself looks more barbarian than it does dwarf. We'll have to fix that later, but the axe will get us through the early game. This class also starts out with the highest amount of strength, which we're definitely going to need for the other dwarfish weapons that I have planned for this run. Going outside, we fought a giant spider, quickly died, and then ended up in our own grave. After this, we went through the tutorial area, cleared up all the regular guys, and fought our first boss, Rick, the Soldier of God, who was very nice to not unleash all of his horrific power upon us. The first and most obvious place that any dwarf should go is to the mines, so I found a mine shaft, went down there, and started attacking the local miners. My main goal here was to get a pickaxe to drop from any of the miners here, because what is a dwarf without a pickaxe? And honestly, I wanted a couple pickaxes so that I could put different things on them and try them out as we would get more Ashes of War, as well as just upgrades in general for them. This turned out to be a little bit harder than I thought it would be for us, because the miners did not want to give up their pickaxes very easily. Apparently, the miners are supposed to have about a 1 in 50 chance of dropping the pickaxe, but I didn't get lucky enough to get one the first couple times I ran through this. So, naturally, out of spite, I killed their troll creature at the end of the cave, then ran out just with my normal axe, and decided to go to Caelid. The main reason I wanted to go to Caelid was to get Radagon's Source Seal, because this would help me with the melee build early on, and that's basically all that we're going to be building for our dwarf. In Caelid, I managed to get lost several times, before eventually finding where Radagon's Source Seal was, and then equipped it, raising our stats up quite a bit. I ran back to Lingrave, found a big axe in a chest on the side of the road. This wasn't at all stolen in any way. And then ran south down to the Weeping Peninsula. Did battle with one of the Knight Cavalry there to test out my brand new axe, and I can confidently say it does the job quite nicely. Honestly, I was pretty surprised how good this great axe was, and I was wondering if the pickaxe would be any better. I still wanted the pickaxe as my primary weapon, because it seemed the most dwarf, but if we had to settle for axes and hammers, I felt like we could probably make do with these. I then traveled around the countryside, fighting everyone and everything that I could see. I ended up in the southernmost castle, fighting this guy right here. These guys were all small fry though, and I longed for my pickaxe, for my real dwarf weapon. So I went back to the mines, farmed the miners for a good hour, and managed to not get one, but two of these lovely pickaxes. With these two pickaxes in hand, we went to face off against our first major boss, Margit.
In search of the Elden Ring. Emboldened by the flame of ambition.
Margit I find to be a fantastic boss overall. I think that he's really well designed for a first encounter boss, even though you can technically not fight him because he's an optional boss. A little bit strange, but you can just go around him if you don't want to fight him. I like the combination that he does between range attacks, heavy attacks, light attacks, really slow and sluggish attacks too. He can do some really, really wound up hits that you swear are going to be coming at any moment and still get hit by. All that being said though, check out all this damage that I got with these pickaxes. They hit like an absolute truck and kind of just tear him down. Both the pickaxes are considered great hammers, but they have piercing damage, and they also get extra damage when enemies are in the middle of their attacks, which is great for Margit because he's basically always in the middle of one of his attacks. Oh, also as you can see, I have a new jellyfish. This is my new friend and my first summon of the game. Jellyfish does do pretty well early on in this game. He's pretty good at soaking up damage. He can also poison things, and if nothing else, he's kind of just a meat shield for enemies to punch for a little bit. After defeating Margit, I started to head towards Stormwind Castle, sort of. Much like pretty much all of my Elden Ring runs that I've ever done in this, and honestly any of my FromSoft games or just any games in general, I tend to get easily distracted, and naturally I just sort of wandered off throughout the countryside, fighting all sorts of stuff, taking all sorts of things, and not really progressing the story in any meaningful way, but it was kind of fun to just run around and attack stuff. Eventually, I ended up going back to the castle, where we quickly ran through it and then ended up at Godric, our very first shard bearer, and another major boss fight that we had to complete in this game.
Plain as a lord. I command thee, kneel! I am the lord of all that is golden.
This turned out to be one of our easiest boss fights during this whole run. Godric is a really fun boss to fight, but he's not a super difficult boss to fight in general. With certain builds, he can be kind of annoying, especially with his tornado attack, and if you try to run away when he's blowing fire, yeah, that can hurt. But as long as you play fairly aggressive against him, he gives you plenty of options to either go out and heal or just keep pressing the attack and hitting him. I guess this would also be a good time to go over the general build that I'm going for with this class. For this build, I was only going to go with 3 skills because we really only needed 3 skills to be a perfect dwarf. That was going to be Vigor, Endurance, and Strength. Vigor is probably one of the most important skills in the entire game, effectively acting as the difficulty slider in the game. The higher vigor you have, the easier the game becomes because you become immune to getting 1 shot or 2 shot or even 3 shot by plenty of big enemies. And being a dwarf, dwarves tend to be able to take quite a lot of punishment and definitely can take a punch. Now, we also needed to give a punch, which is why we invested so heavily in strength as well. Strength was probably my second highest skill by the end of this, besides vigor. Pumping up both of these so we could hit hard and take hits. Yes, we really didn't have any magic abilities throughout this entire run, but who needs magic when we can just pickaxe everything? And then finally Endurance, which basically I was only throwing a few points into Endurance so we could wear whatever armor and use whatever gear we really wanted to so we could roll around. This one I barely put any stats into the entire game. I think I had like 20 or 25 by the end of the actual game. Next stop, Rhea Lucari Academy. They were nice enough to invite me to this school to check it out, and I even got to hang out with the mascot for a little bit, so that was quite nice of them. The wolf boss fight here is pretty fun. I actually like it quite a bit. It can hit really hard and it kind of moves around sporadically, but you can hit it pretty hard in return. So upon defeating the wolf, we continued throughout the rest of the academy, making our way to Rennala, Queen of the Fallen Moon. Rennala is probably one of the most visually interesting bosses in the game in general, but probably also one of the most underwhelming bosses, at least in terms of her first stage. Since the first stage is just run around the room, beat up the children that are glowing, dodge the various furniture that she's throwing at you, and then wait for her bubble to pop so that you can then start hitting her until it either explodes and knocks you away, or until you get out of the way of the explosion. Rinse and repeat until the first stage is done. It's not too difficult, assuming you're not getting assaulted by random globes, but then we do get on to phase 2, and phase 2 is a whole lot better. Again, extremely visually interesting, and this time is actually a pretty challenging boss fight, at least if you're using magic, so I've heard. I actually haven't used any magic builds throughout any of my Elden Ring runs. I've only done melee builds, and for melee, she's not too bad so long as you're able to get close to her. She can alternate attacks pretty easily, and something like her laser is pretty dangerous, as well as her summons can be pretty dangerous as well. Mainly her dragon, that thing's pretty scary. And upon defeating Rennala, we can then respec our character if we need be. I never needed to respec, as we already knew what 3 stats we were building towards and basically nothing else. I did throw some points into Faith. I'll explain that in a little bit as to why I did that. Once I left the academy, I decided to once again kind of just wander around the countryside, get lost, fight random bosses, and upon doing this, I ended up running into one of the coolest bosses, at least visually, the Dragonkin Soldier in the underground area. I love the attacks from this guy. I really like the combination of both frost and lightning attacks. I think that is a really cool attack, even though he himself is not a particularly difficult boss to fight, but he does look really, really cool. After defeating this guy, I decided to go back to Caelid, and this was the main reason why I was putting a couple points into Faith. I tried to go here and get the death roots for the Beastman. My main idea here was to get the rock throw spell, because that seemed like the only spell a dwarf would actually use to chuck rocks, and I did manage to get this. However, I completely forgot to attach it to my character throughout this entire run, so I did not throw any rocks whatsoever. I also got completely destroyed by the gargoyle just outside the Beastman Temple. Apparently my pickaxes are not very good against gargoyles or deathrite birds. I found that out. They take pretty significantly reduced damage from piercing attacks, and that's what my pickaxes do. So I was able to kill them throughout this playthrough at various times, but none of them were particularly easy for me to be fighting. And speaking of punishment, and also speaking of Caelid, I did wander around Caelid for a little bit longer, and then found probably one of the more difficult bosses that I had on this run, or at least the boss that probably gave me the most issues for this run. That was the Godskin Apostle, hidden away in the tower in Caelid. It was at this point that it became a little bit apparent that my strategy of having nothing but a ton of health wasn't entirely working, at least without any damage. I could take a lot of a beating, but that was about all I could do, so I did decide to start putting more points into strength after this fight. However, through just sheer determination and a little bit of luck, we did manage to beat this guy after about 20 minutes. So upon defeating this enemy, I decided that it was probably our best time to start doing our strength training montage.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me. And what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan, your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the fucking hours it takes to get some power. Don't be fucking sour, take a cold shower. Scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder. And fuck all the doubters, they're just fucking downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm pissed off at these fucking clowns who were all taught they deserve an ounce. It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown.
By the time our strength training montage was over, so much time had passed that the Radon Festival was upon us. With this and our newfound strength, I went to challenge Radon. And I wouldn't even be by myself, I'd actually have friends for this fight. And I would like to say through the power of friendship, we were able to completely defeat him, but no, I actually got completely destroyed by a meteor strike. Twice. But not to worry, the third try, I was feeling much better about this. Probably because I had this safety bubble around me, and yep. That definitely worked. With these shard bearers out of the way, we ventured forth onto the capital. I had more or less speed ran through this part. I fought the Dragonic Tree Sentinel, and he's always scary like usual. He hits really hard, but we did manage to overpower him. Ran up a giant tree and fought Godfrey Shade, who buckled under the might of our pickaxes as well, and moved on to the main boss here, at least for now. There's plenty of bosses around the capital. Another really cool and a very fun boss fight. I really like his crazy moveset, since it combines basically everything from Margot, but even more things attached to that. And he has some of the most visually interesting looking attacks in the entire game. I love all the crazy attacks that he can throw at you. I also unlocked a new Ash of War and armor, as you can tell. I got the Flame Strike Ash, which turned out to be quite strong and worked really well with our dwarf build, both thematically and actually hitting things, as you can kind of see. And for armor, I decided to go with the Caden set, because it was the most Norse theme that I could find out of any of the armors. I couldn't find anything that was strictly dwarf theme. I was thinking about going with the Bull Goat armor, but decided that that wouldn't really be very dwarf-like. It doesn't really say dwarf to it. This one doesn't really either, but it's at least somewhat Norse-inspired. Plus, the armor itself turned out to actually not even be that heavy compared to our regular set, so I barely had to throw any points into endurance to wear it anyway. With all the capital being finished, and with the Mountaintop of Giants now available to us, I decided to not actually go there right away. I wanted to go to the sewers to fight Moog. It was at this point where I realized that I had only been to the sewers once and got confused there before, and I got just as confused this time. I spent like a good hour just wandering around not knowing where I was going before I finally found Moog. I don't know if this was thanks to persistence, ignorance, or a combination of both, but we found him. And the following display is probably just the most accurate depiction of what a tank character can do if you just can't get any of the timings right. I think I fought Moog 3 times, and I swear that this run I did the absolute worst. But apparently through just brute force and being able to take a punch, our dwarf character can deal with basically everything. So that was pretty reassuring, even though maybe not flattering on my skill. Regardless, and leaving the sewer, we headed towards the Mountaintop of Giants, where I ran right to the Fire Giant. And the Fire Giant has never been one of my favorite boss fights. He moves around a lot. He can just completely move around the area really fast. and doesn't let you hit too often. He can also hit quite hard, which can be a little bit annoying. It's not such a big deal for this character because we can tank through just about everything he can throw at us. We defeated him, and then before going forth to the next section in the mainline story, I decided I wanted to go to the Halig tree, mostly because I wanted to try fighting Malenia to kind of measure our dwarven strength up to this point. Unfortunately, this was the stream where I had the most technical issues just IRL. We didn't really have any problems actually getting to the Halig tree or even getting to Malenia, but there was a snowstorm going on outside which was messing with my connection throughout the whole day and eventually led to my power being completely knocked out. So I ended up losing all of my footage, and as of recording this video, there's no VODs of it available. The ones on YouTube got corrupted, so I just deleted them, I believe. There might be one or two that at least has us running around the Halig area. I do have some footage here in the background, but as you can kind of tell, this was a bit of a later time, because when I first got to Malenia, I got absolutely destroyed, which I was kind of expecting to happen, honestly. My pickaxes weren't upgraded all the way. I think they were both plus 15, 16, somewhere around there. And my Mimic tier, which I had ran to the underground and got, was also not fully upgraded. I think he was a plus 5 or a plus 6, so not the strongest. I needed to go get both of them upgraded, and once I threw some more upgrades into the pickaxes, I think I got them up to 20 or 21, and then got Mimic tier up to 10. We did do battle with Malenia, and honestly, this build actually worked really well against her. The pickaxes have a really high chance of staggering, as well as they just do really high damage in general. I'm still not that great at fighting Malenia. Whenever she did her waterfowl dance, I got pretty beat up. Luckily, again, we have so much health that we can just kind of tank through that, which was handy. But that was basically the only reason why I would survive that, and even then I still died on her second stage a couple of times. I then headed back to the Mountaintop of Giants and watched Milena light herself on fire in protest for something. Either way, we got teleported to the Sky Castle, where we found everybody's favorite boss fight, the Godskin Duo. The Godskin Duo is another fight that I really don't like. I know a lot of people don't like it. I think that it's kind of dumb that we have a basically 3.5 phase boss fight with two kind of annoying bosses that will just keep spamming stuff if you stay at a distance, or have some really strong combos if you get up close. You can make this a lot easier if you side with the Volcano Manor. You can get Bernard here and he just will absolutely destroy them because he just has so much health and so much sustain. For this, I didn't have Bernard, but I did have Mimic tier, so we had a second dwarf, and 2 dwarfs against 2 gods seems like a pretty fair fight in my opinion. It honestly wasn't. It wasn't fair at all. We kind of just wailed on them and they couldn't do much about it. So I guess the moral of this lesson is if you end up fighting 2 gods at the same time, you should probably bring 2 dwarfs along and the problem will solve itself. Placidusax is up next, which is not a necessary boss fight whatsoever. You can completely ignore him, and I missed him the very first time I played through this game, but he is a very fun, very cool, and very visually interesting boss. A giant 2-headed dragon that shoots out lasers, can also become invisible and just kind of fade into the clouds. Really, really cool. Not super difficult as long as you dodge the laser, but even, again, our build is so tanky that we can just face tank through the laser. The laser's pretty scary. I don't know if it's as scary or a little bit less scary than something like Medeir's laser from Dark Souls 3, but either way, cool dragon fight. After that, we headed towards the boss rush that is the end of this game. So we gotta fight a bunch of really cool bosses. MacLeod is up first, who is just one of the coolest bosses in my opinion, one of my absolute favorites. I love his attack patterns. I love the way that he just jumps around. He's really, really cool in that stage too, and just awesome. He is quite scary though. He hits really hard, and the percentage health is a very scary thing when that actually hits you, but at least you can do pretty high damage towards him, and he does give you plenty of options to actually attack. After defeating MacLeod, we go back to the capital, and we head right for Sir Gideon, the all-knowing, probably one of my favorite boss lines. But Gideon is pretty much a pushover. I mean, even after we beat Malenia, where he has Malenia's spell, his flower is not very impressive. His attacks can do pretty high damage, but I just sicked my puppy on him, and the puppy was able to do this to him, so he's honestly not that difficult of a boss. I think my dog was maxed out at this point, because I wanted to have a dog as well to summon, so we could at least attack some other things with it. Mostly used it and Mimic tier throughout this entire game. A little bit of Jellyfish too, trying to keep with a little bit of a dwarf theme, mostly from the creatures from Deep Rock, but didn't quite work out exactly how I wanted. From there we moved on to Godfrey and Horalu, probably one of, if not my favorite bosses in the entire game. Such a cool boss. Honestly, probably one of the most fair bosses in the entire game too. Everything that they do doesn't really feel like a cheap shot. It all feels like you have plenty of time to react, and you get rewarded for playing aggressive, which I always like. And then there was only 2 bosses left, Radagon and the Elden Beast. Radagon was by far the boss that I was looking forward to the most. I mean, look at this. He's basically telling us rock and stone just from his animation coming in. He is a worthy foe for us to fight as a dwarf. And it turns out that a guy totally made out of stone is, pretty weak against a pickaxe. Pretty weak against 4 pickaxes. This, in hindsight, is honestly not that surprising, but at the time, I did not think that he would get bullied as hard as he did. So, sorry, Radagon. And then we have Elden Beast, which is honestly a real low light in this boss rush right here. Yeah, Gideon wasn't that impressive, but he seems like kind of a mini boss getting you ready for the other bosses. It honestly feels like you should have fought Godfrey right into Radagon if they wanted a double boss fight like this. Elden Beast is honestly pretty annoying. The RNG to it can be a little bit annoying too as to what it's going to do. Sometimes it won't even try to fight you, it'll just keep flying around. When it combos all of its attacks, it can also be a bit annoying, and this giant area is not really fun to run around in. Elden Beast itself, I don't think is a terrible boss, and the music to this place, as well as just the visuals of this place, are amazing. I love all of that. I just think that the way that it was implemented to the end of this game is not the greatest. It really feels like either the area should be much smaller, or we should have torrent that we're running around on so we can at least fight. But either way, our pickaxes felled this giant beast. So in short, can a dwarf become the Elden Lord? Well, of course you can. The dwarf build actually worked out way better than I thought it would. I honestly didn't know how great the pickaxes would be, but it turned out they were quite amazing, especially with all of our strength build. We just went strength and just went HP, and we didn't need anything else. Again, I wanted to throw some magic on here so we could throw rocks, but I forgot to do that. And to kind of celebrate our victory as an Elden Lord, I decided to do a victory lap by fighting Moog in his blood area. Mostly because I had forgot about him, and we probably should kill him at some point. He does not seem like a very good person. Thanks everybody for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was a very fun video to make and a very fun challenge run. I do plan on doing more challenge run videos like this on the channel, so if you do enjoy them, please tell me down in the comments below, as well as share any other type of challenge videos that you would like to see. I have an upcoming one that is going to be a perfect idiot run in Fallout New Vegas, which I think will also be a very fun video. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I really do appreciate it, and special thanks to the members and supporters of this channel. Couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so very much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.